Okay, we'll call the meeting to order again.
Okay.
Hope everyone's read Steve's minutes. If anyone have any corrections?
I have a question.
Okay,
Are these really the meetings from the October meeting or are they the November meeting?
should be the November meeting, right, Steve?
It is the November meeting. I usually just cut and paste it and I missed that.
Yeah.
I didn't change the
Okay.
date at the top.
Okay, I didn't notice that.
Yeah.
So Steve, you'll make a note to change that. Okay. It's good. Do I have a motion to approve? Come on, somebody. A motion to approve? Okay, Donna, and a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, so we're going to go to the staff report first. Steve has a few things to update us on: the downtown mall hazardous tree removal, the RFP for the mall tree management, and new tree planting.
Sure. So the mall RFP is moving. I did hear from the procurement. I don't know what that means, but I know it's been moved on. So I moved on to where, I'm not really sure. Rion also talked with them, I think. Email traffic, but I don't know where that is. Let me see, what else do we have?
Got
Let me see.
The
Or,
downtown tree removal, the
right, so
plan RFP, and the new trees.
right, so the downtown mall removal, I've been talking with Big O Tree and Lawn, and we are looking at probably mid-January. That's ballparking what I'm thinking we'll end up doing. I've talked with some folks at the sawmill that Peggy and I have been chatting with about programming, about moving the logs to a site where they can be stored and maybe even eventually kiln dried. But I think the idea of moving whatever's usable off-site, I think we'll be able to do that the day of the installation, the removals. And we're going to schedule probably a couple of sessions with people that might be interested in using the material. Somehow we're going to have to at least talk with the businesses on the mall to see what kind of products they might be interested in, and then ask the public kind of what we want to do, how many craftspeople and tradespeople are going to be interested, and what kind of dimensions they might want some of the wood sawed in. So it's going to be fun. I've thought about asking some folks that I know by reputation mostly that worked on the Wyoke. They did a number of contests with carving, and they made a lot of products out of the Wyoke, if anybody's familiar with that story. But they had a number of products made and contests, but maybe talking to some of their facilitators to figure out kind of how to go about this. The project that I've done where I was exposed to this was very small, and not really sure what people are going to want to use some of the wood for. I would like to think benches, some specialty benches, some carving, maybe some frames, that sort of thing. But we are open for suggestions, but I think we have a basic direction and kind of people to ask that have done the sort of thing before. The main trick is going to be getting the public involved. So we're also talking about having specific days where people can go and watch, some of the wood be sawn on a portable sawmill, whether we do that on the mall or if we do it, at one of the high schools where there's parking and people can walk around. That's another idea that's been thrown around, but it's going to take a fair amount of logistics.
Yeah.
Steve, we haven't heard about the program that the UVA sawmill wants to do with the high school kids, but that's another possibility that the high school, Charlottesville High School, could get involved too.
Sure.
With using the wood.
Sure, and a lot of it's going to depend on kind of who wants what. If there's, I expect there to be a fair amount of usable lumber, but if it turns out that there's not, we might want to leave it to professionals that actually can take a piece of, a log and actually turn it into what they want to. So again, I'm open to suggestions. Right now, I think I've been talking with Eric, and we've got a few ideas. We're going to meet on the mall tomorrow and actually take some measurements and try to figure out some idea of board footage per tree.
Donna, you had a question? I'm sorry, I interrupted you. No. Okay. And who is Eric?
Kareem.
Anyone else? I'm sorry, did someone else have a question?
Kareem.
Oh, Kareem?
I was just gonna ask how we were gonna engage the public or ask or what, how do we get those interested parties? What's the plan? for that?
Sure. Sure. So I think part of it's going to be using our online, just the website, Parks and Rec website. I think we'll probably have to maybe have something in the newspaper. Really, any other social media. We have a fair amount of social media feeds that we can access to. But I think a lot of it's probably, and of course, as the Downtown Business Association, if they can, particularly if I'm thinking more like bars and outdoor seating, that sort of thing, if they want some sort of a bench or if they want a tabletop, that sort of thing. But start getting an idea of what kind of products we might be looking at. There's a lot of craftspeople and tradespeople around Charlottesville, so there's a lot of people to tap here. I don't feel a particular rush between the time where the trees are cut. We cut the trees in January. They can sit for a while until we really get our ducks in a row, as long as they're, some degree of good cover. They're not going to be vandalized or anything like that.
Yeah, if we wanted to kind of turn them into public amenity, like outdoor seating, not for a business per se, but for the downtown mall itself, who would be the party? Would it
Right.
be finding somebody from the city? Would this, or is it some person that wants to volunteer their time? I guess I'm just throwing it out there. Since they're, thinking of the trees as currently a public amenity and keeping the lumber that comes from them as that.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it'll probably end up being mostly volunteer time. The wood itself is not, they're willow oaks, so they're not particularly as valuable as, like, say, a northern red oak or a white oak. I mean, the wood is useful, but it's not the most desirable species. And I think there's going to be a lot of interest. I don't know if it's worth the city actually hiring somebody to do this, or if that would even be something that the city would want to.
Which would mean issuing an RFP and having people propose.
Right.
Right.
But
Which could be
public-
cumbersome or just take a long time, or what are the disadvantages to doing something like that?
Well, I mean, I would like for this to have a fair amount of public engagement, to get the public involved with kind of what products are being made. Talking with some of the zoning, Craig, I'm trying to remember, Craig Fabio was mentioning that a lot of the businesses might be interested in their outdoor seating, but just like Kareem said, that certainly does not have to be limited to private business. It should be more public use. I mean, I'm thinking like chessboards and that sort of thing, but I don't know if I could really come to something like that.
Would these be sold with the proceeds going into a tree fund, or are they, how do we disseminate them?
Well, that's another idea too. So we have talked, I think 1 or 2 meetings ago, we talked about having some sort of an auction, and maybe even having members of the public be judges. But if there is something like a bidding where people buy these outright, then the money generated from that can be circulated back into the mall. I did that with a land trust that I worked at, and that was a big hit. And again, people might be kind of finicky about, if they're, for example, carving bowls. They want certain pieces of the tree, like crotch pieces. And then who do you decide who gets the good pieces?
Right.
that sort of thing. So
Right.
that's why I was thinking, talking to somebody that, something like the Y Oak, where there was just there was a series of events around it. Talking with them and trying to figure out how they broke this down.
Do you think it might be a good idea for, maybe it's something for the Arbor Committee to get together with Steve after the holidays and then, and then I guess we could bring it up in February and talk about having a better plan. What do you think, Steve?
That sounds fine. I am going to talk with, like I said, one of the volunteer sawmill guys, Eric Bretter, who is very interested in using some of the wood for educational purposes.
Yeah.
We're just going to kind of look at defect and look at board footage and kind of get a better idea of what kind of products we can offer.
Right.
Right.
Steve,
'cause
what
it's
were you
sort of-
thinking about timing again? It's cutting the trees in January and then,
I'm ballparking here, but mid-January.
gotcha. I'm thinking, I don't know if, timing wise, it would necessarily match up, but I think probably a good way to get the public involved is through maybe like at least like a Fridays after 5, like Ting Pavilion type situation. I think they kind of get rolling again in April, so it would be like 3 months after the trees are cut, but that might be one good avenue to get a lot of people kind of involved, maybe like with like some sort of tabling thing or some sort of outreach like during one of those events.
Sure, that's a great idea. And as far as actual events set up, when we first started talking about doing these removals, I was thinking we could actually hold events on the mall. Having maybe someone with 1 or 2 lathes, or actually doing some turning, and a portable sawmill. Logistically, talking with folks that are in charge of safety on the mall, they kind of thought that would be a nightmare. I don't know how that's going to go down, but it would be nice if we could keep most of the events on the mall since the trees were taken from the mall. I don't know how that's going to play out. It's not the worst thing in the world to think about if we end up having some sort of educational opportunity at a high school. That would also make sense. But again, I think certainly using the pavilion's events is a good way to reach a lot of people quickly.
Tim, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thanks, Peggy. I had a couple thoughts. These are pretty unorganized, so maybe at least some of them are useful, but I really just want to second Kareem's idea that these are currently serving as a public amenity in their tree form, and finding a way to kind of recycle them as a new form of public amenity is pretty super. Like, it's a strong overall goal. The other thought I had was, I don't know if anybody on the tree commission, or if you, Steve, have been in touch with any of the professors at the A school, the School of Architecture over at UVA, but I know they've got some landscape architecture as well as some architecture professors who are currently like working in this area of trying to upcycle diseased or dying trees into new public amenities. So I don't know if this actual opportunity feeds into what they're trying to do, but that might be a fruitful connection to make. And I could share like names of who's working on that kind of stuff. And then the third thought I had was, depending on how much board feet and what dimensions and everything, like the utilitarian idea of having benches or other sort of functional amenities on the downtown mall is really great. And I don't know if it's still alive, but there's been talk about like a Vinegar Hill Park, kind of where the Code Building now is, between the Code Building and Omni. And maybe there's something that could be done that's, has a sculptural element or is a blend of function and aesthetics or sculpture with this wood that kind of otherwise wouldn't be happening around Vinegar Hill Park. It's like a small site kind of near the bus stop, but just again, some unorganized thoughts to add to the mix, but
Thank you.
The other thing that we are going to be talking about this week with my meeting with the people that are actually in charge of the mall is what to do with the. So some of them we might cut as low as we can and cover them with a hole, but I still like the idea of having a couple of sculptures, carvings of the stumps themselves instead of cutting them down. You've got a number of hazards associated with that. People can trip. What are we going to do to put outdoor seating around them? So there's areas there that need to be ironed out. I think if the city has its way, they're going to pretty much cut the trees down as low as they possibly can and cover them with some sort of a metal grate so that people won't trip. So we'll see about that. But I think we can come up with something pretty creative.
So my suggestion, again, I think it would be a good idea for you and the Arbor Committee to get together and maybe we can present a plan in February.
Agreed.
Does that make sense to you, Steve?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, so you were going to tell us about new tree planting too. You sent out a list today or yesterday, I think.
Yep, I did. Hold on, I'm actually emailing Rian the link.
Oh, okay.
1 second.
You came in late. Steve again had problems with just the process with the city of getting this going. So Jeff sent a link and
Missy Creasy is joining. Who's Bar's iPhone? Is that anybody who's on currently? Oh, BAR? Maybe it's the BAR's iPhone? Sorry.
I don't know who.
I don't know if I should admit or not.
I would think it'd probably be fine.
Yeah, I don't.
I would say go ahead and admit them.
Yeah.
And I think Rian's probably trying to join too, so it might be him.
Okay.
Um,
Could Bar's iPhone identify themselves? Ah, yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Rian. And I think Missy's trying to come in too.
She's in. Yeah.
Okay. So Rian and Missy, we, again, things didn't work right. So Steve couldn't start it. So we had to stutter step and Jeff sent out a link. So Jeff is the host right now.
And I'm
And-
currently recording so I can share that iCloud link with Steve and Rian and whomever else needs it, and that can then be shared publicly.
So, and we've just talked about, Steve's talking about his report, and I think you're going to talk about the new tree planting, Steve.
yes. So I've kind of like I've been talking all along. I'm focusing on schools. I would say I've got about 130 or so locations picked out and the species that I want to plant on those sites all around the schools. And my walk around the schools, there's a lot of potential, and most of the space is really pretty unrestricted as far as root development for the trees, and there's no power lines, obviously. So for the most part, I went pretty big with canopy trees, and had some of the old trustees that we always use, the willow oaks and the poplars and the London planes, but also adding in a few red oaks here and there. I don't want to go too heavy because they get bacterial leaf scorch, but certainly a lot of gums, a few elms here and there. Hickories, my guess is that I'm going to have a hard time sourcing those at the nurseries, but I do like hickories. And then as far as smaller spaces, where usually we are planting a lot of red buds and dogwoods, I'm trying to diversify that a good bit with maybe some yellowwood and serviceberry and a few of the other more slow growing, some of the slow growing smaller trees, just for some diversity. Doing the inventory of the streets, I mean, we planted a lot of dogwoods, and a lot of redbuds. So trying to change that up a little bit. I've got maybe 20 to 30 spaces that I want to fill around the city that I think I've discussed with several of you. Some of the more obvious vacancies, the street trees replacing. And that was not included in the Word document that I sent out, but I've, for the most part, got a handle of that too. So if I don't go through the entire funding source, my original thought was to plant $50,000 worth of trees in the spring, and then $50,000 worth of trees in the fall around parks. But really, the schools had a lot of spaces to offer. So I planted heavy at the schools. If I have any money left over, I would like to be able to throw that towards watering. Paying somebody to water. And I don't know necessarily with the way the funding is awarded, that's allowed. Another reason why I chose the schools this time is because we don't have the staff to water the trees, and I'm hoping that the schools can help out in that regard. And
I think we spent some money, Rion, on watering for the last time because, excuse me, Rion had to spend, I'm sorry, I'm putting words in your mouth, Rion, but I think Rion had to use some of that money for a contractor to help him actually make sure the trees are going in the right place. So to me, I think, we want these trees to survive, obviously, or it's no use planting them. So it seems to me that we need to water them, and that should come out of that money. Rion can answer the question, I guess, but that's my thought. We can't hear you.
We still can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Yes,
You can.
yeah, we can.
Give me 1 second. I'm just trying to switch over. Okay. Yeah, so the CIP funding for the replanting, it does not specifically say we have to plant all at once. We can split it up. That's a good thing. The other thing that we can do too is in the language, I know we put there for some type of staff time or using someone to assist us with watering. So I think there is room for that. Meaning we in parks, we're having a hard time finding seasonal employees. So it's very hard for us. But we can sit down, myself and Steve and some other park staff and some tree commissioners to figure out if we can kind of get a contract, shall I say, together in order for someone to do it for us. That can also be explored.
So that's the answer. Thank you, Rion.
And hopefully too, I would think if you're in elementary school, you've got trees in close proximity, you might use that opportunity to teach them about trees. So I am hoping to piggyback a little bit on schools. That's yet to be determined. But.
Good. So I think, is there any questions from Steve? Kareem, did you have a question?
Quick question. I don't have the list in front of me, but how does the school reconfiguration impact? Does it have any impact to the locations of the new potential trees, or how do we find that out?
The school reconfigurations?
There's like the whole school reconfiguration project for the high school in Burnley Moran, I think.
Isn't
I-
it for, it's it's Buford.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yes, I'm not planting trees at
Okay,
Beaufort.
okay. Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah, sorry.
confirming. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, but certainly if anybody has specific, trees that they want to see planted, and they see a good place for it, and it's a species that's not being represented well, from the list, let me know. And I tried to be pretty site specific, really trying to get the right tree on the right site. So that's primarily the reason that I chose the species that I did. But if there's something in there that you really want to see and you've got a great spot for it, let me know. I'm still open to suggestions for Clark. We took down a very large oak tree right at the entrance of Clark Elementary School, coming up with a suitable replacement. Got a couple of ideas. Peggy and I have talked about it. Paul Josie and I have talked about it. But making sure that we get the right tree there. So again, open to suggestions.
All right, thank you. So we'll move on to, unless there are any other questions, the recent activities. First one is Garrett and Second Street trees. As you know, we had tree commission approved for these trees to be put under the tree conservation ordinance. And Steve had actually sent it on to city council where it was going to be have a public hearing yesterday, actually. In the meantime, Paul Josie actually made a nice suggestion for us to meet with PHA. So I guess it was a couple weeks ago, Rian, Steve, Jeff Ayton, and myself met with Mandy Burbage. She's a real estate manager of PHA, and Sunshine Mathon, might not be pronouncing his name correctly, who is a CEO. We met at face to face, actually. It was very nice at Parks. Still wondering why we can't meet face to face, but anyway, we had a nice conversation with them. They came in and seemed very sincere about the fact that they understand the importance of the trees, whether they've heard from NDS or city council or planning commission or whoever, but they seem sincere on working to see that they can preserve as many as possible. They asked us to not go to city council last night because it could turn into an argument between us and them and put city council in a position that might be difficult. And so we've agreed to meet with them. They reminded us, of course, that often it's the utilities that cause a problem of saving trees, and that we need to have public works in the room where it happens. So, and also Dominion is another player that often doesn't have to necessarily, comes in late sometimes and cause a problem for saving trees. So it would be good. We'll try to get them at the table too. So Rian and Steve are working on a plan that we can sit down with them and look at at this point, they have more or less a conceptual site plan, not a site plan in concrete yet. And in fact, they've actually are planning to move some buildings away from some of the other trees along Second and Garrett. So that's the plan. I don't know if Steve or Rian or Jeff want to add anything to that.
Sure, I will. As it turns out, the most of the impact is really going to be in the next phase, actually I think in the third phase of the project, where they would really be impacting trees along Garrett Street. So we have time for this. I don't want to wait too long. Rian and I are planning to have a meeting in place in the next maybe 3 or 4 weeks. But as thinking back, I think the completion date for the entire project was like 2030. So again, I think the major impact is going to be coming probably somewhere in 2024, 2025. So hopefully we have time to get our ducks in a row for this. So there is some urgency, but it's not quite as urgent as it seemed a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, and I would second or third that summary that it was a very good conversation. They were amenable to talking about it. We're very much interested in trying to preserve the trees and had already in future site plans made some adjustments for the trees on Second Street. Peggy, is that right?
Yeah, I think
yeah.
second, is actually that's phase 3, and phase 4, which they don't even have a concept for, is really the rest of Garrett.
Right. So I think there is a a strong interest and a very good understanding of the value that these trees add to that urban landscape and also to the project. So they seemed very, very interested. They also, because they've worked elsewhere in the Southeast and I think in the country, have a pretty good understanding of the ways in which tree ordinances can help with preservation and with incentivizing preservation. And so they, I think, could help Vicky with some, codes conversations relative to making it not penalizing public housing developments because they are often on a tight budget, but working on giving them some leeway and or making some adjustments relative to public housing developments, but otherwise really holding developers accountable for the loss of those trees within the public way. So some good stuff there, I think, and they would be a good
Great.
resource as a developer, but a developer with a good conscience that could help with some of that conversation.
Good. Any questions on that? All right, okay. So next, there's a joint public hearing with Planning Commission and City Council next Tuesday, December 13th. 3 items of our interest are on the agenda. The CIP budget, which Mark will talk about a little later, and our request, the climate action plan, which Vicky will talk about, that they've asked us to support. And then Azalea Springs development is also going to be heard. And we have written a statement to that, and Vicky will talk about that. We've made a couple revisions to it later. But anyway, it'll be a busy night for the third thing I had to talk about is that Dan Frisbee, who is the water resource specialist at the city of Charlottesville, emailed me and asked if we could make a more formal statement to support the restoration of Scants Branch tributary stream going through McIntyre Park. He came and talked to us a couple of months ago, and we talked about it. In general, we seem to be supportive, although it breaks my heart to see 70 big trees coming down. I've written a paragraph. He just wanted a short paragraph. So I sent it out, and I think we need to just approve that. So I think hopefully you've had time. It was very short to read it. Does anyone have any questions on it? Can I have a motion to approve? Okay, Jeff. Second, Donna. All right. So I will send that to Dan and copy Rian and Steve. I think that's all we need to do.
Real quick, Peggy, can we vote on that motion?
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Yes, I think we do need it. Okay, all in favor? Raise your hand. Aye. Thank you. Everyone approved. Thank you, Tim. All right, so we've done with that. Committee reports, we'll start with Mark. And he might perhaps can give us an update on the handout and talk about the CIP request.
Okay, well, Jean and I have been talking about the handout a little bit. I think Holly's been swamped. She was originally developing a draft for that. So sort of in the week after this meeting, we're hoping to have something together that we could share with the rest of the committee as a draft of our handout. And we've discussed the sort of format or outline of it, I think, in the last meeting. Some illustrations make it attractive, not too many words, just what we do and how you can be involved, kind of thing. And there are a couple items on the website that I still have to get in touch with the folks who are working on that to confirm they're completed. I just wrote myself another note for that. The upcoming council and planning commission meeting, Steve had submitted 5 items for the CIP. The planning commission, I think after maybe the city manager cut one of them back, the planning commission kind of reinstated. So we have 100,000 in urban tree planting, 100,000 for this year's installment for the worst of the ash trees, the hazardous liability ash trees, and $100,000 for the downtown mall trees management. And I'll bring Steve in a second. These last 2 items seem not to have been addressed. One of them was just in the operations budget. We requested $50,000 for just removing weather-related tree damage, just so that we can sort of be up to date with trees that have been damaged in storms lately. And I'm not clear exactly on what goes in capital versus operations. And then the 5th item similarly was something that could be in operations as well, but request for $75,000 to help offset expenses for invasive plant control and containment activities. So, you know, the tree commission had this, I don't know that it's an annual thing, but we have had presentations that discussed invasive removals, and it's kind of an overwhelming issue that is traditionally underfunded, hardly funded at all compared to the menace that it creates in the city. And we really have to, I applaud Steve's initiative in trying to begin to address this problem in a way that we can pare it back, because we're definitely losing. So I think the question on the table, and Peggy will talk about relief, after this, but I think there's a discussion item. It's sort of how do we advocate for these 2 other items, the urban forestry operational budget for the storm damage and the invasive plant control item at $50K and $75K respectively.
I asked Mark, and I'll ask everybody now, particularly Steve and Rian. I mean, we're very happy that Planning Commission has passed on the tree planting and the ash, and that they added the mall management. The question is, should we push for the other 2 things? You don't get what you don't ask for, but we're certainly happy that the Planning Commission, I think, added the mall tree maintenance as an ongoing thing too, not just for next year, but it's, if I read the CIP right, it's for the next 5 years. So what do you, Steve and Rian, think?
I'm still a little bit new. Rian can speak more about how this process works. I'm happy to talk about kind of the importance, particularly of the invasive, well, but both of them, but I'll let Rian go first.
You seem to be stuck.
Working on his audio. I can say that Rian's predecessors here were back have wanted some flexibility in the operating budget in terms of sort of specifically earmarked items. But again, I'm not really sure. I think it's always an evolving process.
And Rian, are you back?
You're muted. Yeah, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, no.
Sorry, I'm just having a lot of difficulties. There we go. Yeah, so I would definitely push for invasives. If the new requests, we've got a few new requests, but I would definitely push for invasives because we are losing the battle on invasives within the city. So that's one thing I'd ask Tree Commission to really push that agenda item. In our operational budget, we did increase our tree contract by roughly around about $50,000, and that is in our operational proposals. So hopefully, if we get that passed, we'll have that extra 50,000 to address storm damage, or as I like to call the miscellaneous items.
So Rian, am I correct in thinking that there are sort of two separate proposals? There was an operational proposal that maybe isn't distributed the same way as the CIP that some folks have seen. I think Peggy has seen.
Yeah, so operations budget, when we do our operational budget, there's a few steps that occurs. It's not that granular for the end user. For example, like the budget, the CIP proposal is very granular because it talks about every project. But when it comes to our operation budget, what the public will see is big, the big picture. So we do have it in the granular level of line items that is under contracted services. That's what we put it under.
Okay. All right. Good. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense because it's really, it becomes more discretionary for your department. That way doesn't have to be every line item kind of examined by the public the same way. But it's in there, you say, so that's good.
Yeah, Steve put it in the operation budget after my review, and I kept it in there. So,
and I'm very interested in invasives, so I will become, after I cycle off the tree commission, a volunteer point person. I had my glyphosate delivered this weekend. I'm ready to go.
yeah.
I think Mark and I will look at our statement and change it a little bit and maybe beef up the, obviously thank them for keeping in the CIP, the 3 items, and but we will put some emphasis on the invasive, Steve.
Great. So just
We'll change our letter a little.
and maybe as far as something to strengthen the argument, we are investing a lot in recovering canopy. Everything we plant is going to be either overcome with invasives or the existing areas that were identified during the tree canopy study. We're losing that, and I think a lot of the stuff that was talked about in the canopy was pretty much invaded areas that really aren't offering much. So if we really want to talk about having forests, urban forests that can actually contribute something to our dilemma here, we have to manage the invasives and plant more trees.
Has the tree commission ever thought about having like a PRISM representative on the commission, similar to like we do for cats?
Sorry, Jeff, who's PRISM? Is that the?
They're invasives.
A great suggestion. Mhm.
Yeah, they're an environmental group that advocates for good stewardship, but have a very heavy concentration on invasive control.
Yeah, they're a good group.
They're a very good group.
I took a workshop with them a couple of weeks ago, and maybe one option is to bring someone from PRISM to a meeting to do a presentation.
Yeah.
Tim Maywald of the Tree Stewards has done a huge amount of invasive removal with the Tree Stewards, and I think he's now has some association with PRISM, or it could be their director, Beth, or something. Probably a number of people might be able to just join us for a future meeting to talk about that.
That's a good idea.
And for future listeners of this recording, that's the Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management.
So as far as what I'm thinking about is how the money would be used. For example, I did get $75,000. I would pick a park or perhaps two parks and find a good section of it where there's really nothing in there that we want. It's all invaded with vines or ailanthus or both, probably the whole gamut, and literally doing some chemical applications in there and then taking a mulcher, like hiring a forest mulcher. There's companies out there that do that. I don't know if you guys have seen those machines work, but essentially just go through and chop everything into mulch. And then I would give that time to settle. Then I would go back in and probably spray some of the sprouts from ailanthus or bittersweet or whatever is coming up, and then replant. And probably experiment with a number of different spacings, probably very shade intolerant species, something that's going to grow quickly. And do that in every park with any reasonable acreage. And that's going to be my approach.
So given our population of deer browse is a pretty significant issue with establishment of, small species. So do we do deer exclosures? Do we just protect the individual trees? What's this?
I'm talking about planting more or less, in tubes, so 5-foot tubes around each seedling.
Okay.
So that will cover, in my experience, that gives the tree enough protection until they can really start jumping out of the tube. And that's what I did with the state, working with the Department of Conservation and Recreation. That was our approach. We did a lot of prescribed fire as well, but I don't think we're going to get away with that.
And that helps with girdling from small rodents too.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the approach, which is pretty intensive. But I didn't want to, just so you're not, surprised by my approach, and that's been effective in my experience. The public, it's very, they see a lot of destruction from the mulcher, but can't really tell after a year or so. But that's how I would plan to use the money.
One advantage from having Prism is just our own messaging, because I was similarly kind of appalled to see that the only way to get rid of porcelain berry was spraying at the right time of year. And I was thinking it could be done in some other way, but there's really no way for a lot of this stuff besides spraying.
Not on
Sorry, just real quick, I just said in the chat, I just shared a link. Tim is actually doing a talk right after we get off from 7 to 9 in regards to identifying and controlling non-native invasives, if any of you guys are interested. That's through CATS, Tim Newell.
Thank you. Vicky, you had your hand up.
I was just going to ask about labor for this. There are so many people involved with, CATS and Master Naturalists and RCA and James River Association who do invasives removal. Will you be using volunteers from those groups?
Oh, absolutely.
Good. Yeah.
Absolutely. But that might be depending on the site.
Yeah.
And some of these large acreages, you can't bring volunteers in there. It's just too disheartening. You set them into a 20-acre patch of ailanthus and bittersweet. It's kind of sad. So that's why, hit it hard. It's intense. And then certainly have, like, Forest Hills is a great example of a good park it's a reasonable size. It's pretty shady. It can work for a couple of hours and actually see their progress, see what they've done. But if you get them in the middle of a porcelain berry patch, like Quarry Hill or Quarry Park, for example, you give them a pair of loppers and tell them to go cut stuff. It's just, you're not going to make any progress. The problem's too overwhelming.
Yeah.
All right.
And it can certainly be very transformative, I think, for park spaces where people have not had access to areas that have been overgrown with vegetation. So if there's also the possibility to have a mulch trail, or if there's like, you know, some just small interventions that can help people kind of understand that the park spaces are bigger than they might have initially realized, it can be a kind of like, you know, mind opening, eye opening way of re-seeing our parks and our park spaces.
We're gonna acquire more land, but also going back to, Tim Beatley's talk, I think there's a lot of educational opportunities here too. He's got graduate students, PhD students, but actually implementing some of the plantings that he was talking about and actually starting from a blank canvas and really seeing what's going to come back and having students available to monitor it and actually getting money to support these programs. That's my long-term goal. We'll see. Get the money first.
Kareem, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wanted to ask, are there any grant programs that can take that money further? For battling invasives, is there something like that?
There's a lot of grant programs. Invasives is a very hot topic. Environmentally speaking, that is the disaster. That's the worst environmental problem that I can think of. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of research, a lot of interested universities. Absolutely.
I can, at least for me, it sounds, if that like 75,000 or whatever the ask is, if that can get us even a bigger pile of money, it definitely sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. Are you talking about like a match type program or?
Yeah, or yeah.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Does the DOT or Dominion, those entities that are basically opening up the corridors for invasives, do they have any sort of like grants kind of similar to Kareem was saying that to utilize locally, or do they have any responsibility in dealing with that? Because like you mentioned Quarry Park, I'm there like every day, just like along the I-64 corridor, and I mean it's just crazy.
They don't, I mean, you think about invasives, they're very disturbance oriented. To answer your question, no, they don't have a whole lot of give back for the disturbances they cause. But there is, kind of speaking to what Kareem was talking about, there is money for programs everywhere. This is a very hot topic right now. So I think presenting this to council now, there's a lot of talk about it. I think if we push hard, I'm hopeful we'll get it. But if you want, I can help with talking points if you're interested. I tried to hit them kind of in my request, but.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Mark and I will look at our statement and probably touch base with you, Steve, and see if we can beef it up a little bit.
Sure.
And we'll drop the operational money. Okay.
I didn't actually go into the operational bit. I don't want to kind of take away any thunder from that. But yes, my budget is running out and I haven't even come to severe winter season yet. And I'm expecting it's going to be just the same next year. So
Looks like Ron said that he's increased your operational budget through the operations money, $50,000. So that's good.
right. It's needed.
I have on here approval of a CIP request, but maybe we should go on and get approval from the tree commission that we will drop the operational request, since Rion said it's going to be funded through a different stream. And thank everyone for supporting the others and keep pushing for those and beef up the invasive control money. Does that make sense to everybody? Do I have a motion to approve that? Vicky and
Yes.
yes, okay. Mark will second it. All those in favor, say aye.
Hi. Yeah, we're all muted. Those are muted eyes with hands.
Yeah, okay. Jeff, could you share the screen with me so I can talk about relief a little bit. Let's see. All right, here we go. All right. Well, we had an exciting week last week. As you know, Relief has been working in the 10th and Page area to let me plant trees there. So last week, and we've been knocking on doors through the early fall with the help of some of our teenagers from the Green Team Ambassador Program that we work with this summer, and taught them about the value of trees and nature in the city. We partner with City of Promise, and we had about 10 students from Charlottesville High School. So on Saturday, about a week ago, we got them out and planted trees in 10th and Page. And 3 of them actually live in 10th and Page. And this is Troy Brown's house, the student in the middle there. And that's a black gum. We planted 5 trees on 5 on different houses. And on the left there, that's Liam Kelly's house. We planted a tulip poplar. And then you can see our team of kids on the right. It was a fun day, beautiful weather, and they really got into planting. And it was really fun seeing them get so excited about it. And then let's see if I can make this. Then we also put tags on the trees, how to maintain your trees. We tried to make it very simple about watering, pulling weeds, maintaining mulch, but not too much, pulling away from the trunk. And the next thing we'll do is we're going to put some signs around on some of the trees that are planted and hopefully get some more people interested. And you can see the sign there. So we have cats there and the tree commission and Relief, trees planted by all of them. And so now what happened I'm going to stop sharing. So the rest of the trees we planted last week. So we planted almost 40 trees. They arrived on Monday, the trees, and they were supposed to arrive on Tuesday, but some of us scrambled, and we had hired a contractor. Thank goodness he showed up on Monday, and we ran around the neighborhoods planting flags and making sure everybody was going to get the right tree in the right place. And we planted 35 more trees. And Tim got a tree in his yard. Tim and Jeff were helping us knock on doors, and Paul Josie too this fall, to get people. So we were really excited. I think our goal was to get 20 trees. We doubled that amount, and we haven't finished yet. So we plan to do this again next year. So it was really successful. We planted mainly a lot of shade trees, white oaks, willow oaks, tulip poplars, and black gums. And then we had some small trees like serviceberry, and sweet bay magnolia was a popular tree. So we'll be excited to see these trees grow and get more and more. So thanks to everybody who helped. So Jeff is going to talk about we didn't get the Garrett and Second Street trees yet under our conservation ordinance, but we have about 20 more trees. Jeff is that Makesha and I have proposed, and Jeff is going to what we want to do tonight is show you the trees, get your approval to move forward, and then Steve will go out and assess them, come back in January, we hope, and give us his opinion. So Jeff.
So thank you, Peggy and Makesha, who in absentia, for going out and doing all the legwork on this. I think there are some great trees. We have probably 15 or more. I'm not sure how many oaks are in the grove at Forest Hills, but maybe that's something that Steve can specify. So the first one here in the list is an ash that is along Jefferson and 2nd Street Peggy, is that correct? You're
There are
seeing
actually
this-
four ash. This
Four
is
ash.
just the four of them.
Okay, yes, four of the ashes along this Second Street in Jefferson. Steve, assume you're treating these potentially, yeah, okay. And then, as Peggy said, Steve is going to go and do his own evaluation of them to just confirm their health. There are two Dawn Redwoods, and those are on Preston Avenue, we believe on public property, although that may need to be something confirmed. Peggy's pretty sure that they're not in the railroad right of way, but that they are in public property. I'm sure you all have seen these driving up Preston, but they're pretty amazing specimens.
Yep. Jeff, can I just make a comment?
Yes.
It's actually on there, but there's a woman named Vicky Craw. I don't know if many of you knew her, but she was a secret philanthropist in the city. In fact, she didn't, people would call her Miss Anonymous. This was given by Miss Anonymous because she wanted to be anonymous. But she was a wonderful woman. If you saw her, you would think she was the Queen of England. She was very handsome. And but she not only did she give so much money for trees and plants in Charlottesville, but she started the first Planned Parenthood organization here. She was behind Ivy Creek being preserved. She started the first low-income housing project or foundation in Charlottesville. So she was a woman of many interest, but she loved nature. And Cole Hendricks, our city manager, who just died, who was city manager for 25 years, would quiver whenever Vicky Craw called him up. She'd always take his phone call, but he knew that she was upset about some tree in the city. So she planted these. Actually, my husband, who's a landscape architect too and an arborist, she had him plant or design many plantings, and she wanted those trees there. So the city planted them along with banks of jasmine and spirea and other trees. So I'm almost positive they're city property, but Steve, if you could check that and make sure.
Excellent. It's a great story. So he quivered out of fear, not out of excitement.
Oh yeah, he knew that
Trepidation.
Vicky asked he was going to do.
Oh, that's fantastic. We need another Miss Vicky.
Yes.
We should all be on the lookout.
Yeah.
Next is the American Elms, and this is one of 5, I think, pictured here, and in the nomination form here along East High Street. I'm not sure if there's anything else you'd like to add to this, Peggy.
Well, we know that probably East High Street was, as most cities, had streets planted with elms. And these are the survivors. We are treating them. Steve's going to look at them and see their condition. They're probably not obviously in great condition, but I did check them as a sort of a heritage tree, a heritage of elms that were planted along city streets. And they're, as I said, they're 5 or 6. I can't remember there. So even though they might not be in the best condition, they are certainly a remnant of what our city streets used to look at, and perhaps they're worth conserving.
Excellent. Second to last is the Forest Hills Grove of Oaks, and noting these both as heritage and specimen trees. Peggy?
Well, the reason I put them as heritage is obviously this was a forest because it's called Forest Hills Park. And actually along Forest Ridge Street, which borders Forest Hills Park, there are 2 magnificent oaks. I want Steve to look at them. They might be in the right of way, particularly one that sits right on the edge of the street. So they may be private property. If they're private property, we wouldn't submit them right now, but you know, it was once a forest and this is the remnant. It's probably one of the, particularly in the summer, if you go over there, the shadows that play from those trees on the lawn is just beautiful.
Mhm.
And they just make a wonderful setting. So I think we ought to look at, we lost the biggest oak in the park, probably due to some construction when we renovated the spray pool. But I think it's worth, Steve and I talked about it, and certainly worth looking at those trees and Steve give us his advice, which ones are worth conserving.
Mhm.
Along Ridge Street too, Steve, if you look at those two trees. I mean, Forest Ridge, it's called Forest Ridge Street.
One thing that this makes me wonder about is, you know, I guess we can go on the website and you can look up what trees have been nominated and then approved by council to be one of these 4 trees, but there's no marking if you were to walk past one of these trees that would identify it as that. Is there, are there tags that the city has, Steve, that could be used in some way? I don't know if it's like an arboretum marker that could go on the ground, or if it's something that could get, you know.
We do. I'm sure we've used them in the past. I know horticultural folks have used some in the past, but it's just essentially a little nail with a spring. It doesn't really hurt the
Mhm.
tree.
Yeah.
I've looked into that, so that's something we could do, and particularly just going to those trees on Forest Hill Ridge. I'm pretty sure those are private. I'll look into that, but I think the one that I think you're thinking of, Peggy, is private. Pretty sure.
They probably are. You know, Cats has they do a marker that's actually on a little metal stand. They have the notable trees, and they put this next to their notable trees. But that's a great idea, Jeff. We should be giving some recognition to these trees. So I think it's something we should look into.
And then the
There's
last of these is, this is just one oak, right, Peggy? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'm not as familiar with these, but
Yeah,
noted
one
as, yeah. Oh, this isn't the right image then?
Do you have the picture? This is a wonderful tree.
Yeah, it's not this one though.
No,
And that's a different project. Um,
I can pull it up
you
if you
did,
want.
I think you did send one, so.
This is, you all should see this tree. If you share with, well,
I'll let you share,
okay, let me find it.
or I can find it where you
Talk
guys
among
don't have to.
yourself and I'll find- Somebody talk and I'll find the picture in a second here.
So,
This is a beautiful tree.
so I think that the next step in this would be to make a motion to have these approved to move to Steve's court for his review and recommendation.
All right, if you let me share, I'll show this picture. All right,
Sorry, we'll wait for that motion until.
yeah.
Thank you, shoot.
Okay,
Yeah,
here it is. This is probably the most gorgeous trees of all the ones we're recommending, but I've sat, all my children went to Charlottesville High School, so, and they were all played soccer. So I've seen this tree for a while. I think it's probably some red oak, Steve, I'm not sure, but it's a
spectacular.
gorgeous tree, as you can see, and a huge canopy.
Yeah.
So it's certainly worth preserving.
And just beyond, it's an urban forest that could use some invasive
Yeah.
management.
You know, when we present these to city council too, Steve, I was thinking we should include pictures. And I'll send these all to you. You know, so they see what these trees look like too, besides, I think that's what we did in March of 21.
Right.
So anyway, I just wanted you all to see that tree because it's a showstopper. So I think that we
Okay,
just
I saw a motion. Sorry, Peggy.
go on.
No, it's yours.
Oh, well, I'll make a motion to approve the trees.
Second.
Okay.
excellent. Seconds, then all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank
Now
you,
we
Steve.
move on to Vicky. Afraid we're not gonna be able, we may not, now we're gonna talk about sad stories. Oh, Vicky, we can't hear you.
Okay, you want me to start with the bad news?
Yeah, the bad news.
I'll do that. On the planning commission agenda for next week is the Azalea Springs application for waiver of a critical slopes waiver. The staff recommendation is to approve the waiver with conditions. Now, I just saw that at 5 o'clock and I haven't had a chance to really read through it. So I don't know exactly what the conditions are. But that's not what we were going to ask for. We're going to ask for denial. And we have a draft letter, which you've all seen, or it was sent to everybody. I think now that we have the staff report, I think we need to go back to the drawing board and decide what to say next. Maybe come up with another letter, or just make comments at the meeting. Any thoughts on that?
We approved a letter once before when we
Right.
thought this was coming up for the planning commission. And
Yeah.
Vicky had just made some changes after the applicant resubmitted.
Right.
So we had to make a few changes to that, and that's what we sent out to you.
That's recent enough. Yeah. And it might be that letter is fine to
I'm
send.
not sure we have to change it. I mean,
Yeah.
our position, I think, is the same. We'd still like to.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful forest. It's 8 to 9 acres, mature forest. Steve and Keith Pritchard and Vicky and I walked through it. It's, the neighbors, of course, are very sad. It's a forest that could be, has some invasives in it, but not terrible.
Mm-mm.
So I think, it's our job, we're the tree commission, what's sad is, this, Vicky and I were just sort of exchanging emails. These critical slope seems to be approved. Stribling, we did not get involved in that, but Stribling, on Stribling Avenue, 12 acres of mature forest basically are coming down. Park Street, Ryle Road, that's another probably 4 acres of very mature forest. Now Azalea's 8 or 9 acres. And then there's another one, Vicky just told me, coming up in January.
Yeah.
And these all seem to get approved. I mean, it's sort of sad. The steep slopes ordinance was, not sure when it was developed, but a lot of people worked on it really hard, and it doesn't seem to carry much weight.
It sounds like something we may want to do some more work on in
Yeah.
connection with the zoning ordinance.
Right. I mean, besides
Put
critical
teeth into it.
slopes, they're critical forest.
Right, right.
Yeah, I think we need to again.
Sorry, can we just reiterate when it says staff recommendation? Who exactly are we talking about when they're referring to staff?
Well,
Well,
the staff person is Matt Alfley.
So it's NDS.
It's ND,
NDS.
okay, the NDS staff, gotcha.
So maybe we should consider, approving the letter that was sent out for this meeting, subject to any necessary changes between now and next week. Is that, looking at that and comparing to the report, if there are any inaccuracies, I can correct them.
I'd move that.
Oh, yes, okay.
Do we have a second? Oh, from Missy. Let's see, Missy, I think, Jeff, Missy may want to talk.
You want me to read that? She
Ah.
chatted. said, I
Yes.
will recommend that the group review the conditions and the reasoning. There's potential for more tree preservation than if they develop by right.
Yeah. But if they developed by right, it would be less than what they're planning to do. They would have to come back with a completely different plan, I think.
I'm not sure.
Am I
Maybe,
right, Missy?
would Missy like to maybe
Yeah.
explain that?
Hi, everybody. I'm not going to go into depth on the report because it doesn't, we just got it posted at noon
Yeah.
today. But I recommend that you guys take a look at it. The considerations involved with it were very central, trees were very central to that determination. And yeah, take a look. Any materials that you all have already submitted have been included in the packet. And anything that came after the packet will be forwarded directly to Planning Commission and Council.
Okay. Right. We haven't submitted anything yet. This is what we're working on now, so.
So let's see, we had a motion and a second. Does everyone approve that? Raise your hand.
We're approving to proceed with
A letter,
the letter.
yes.
Okay.
And that was sent to everyone. And we had approved it before, but we made just a few changes because
Yeah.
they resubmitted. And as Vicky said, we'll look at it again and see if we need to make any changes before.
Because there may be an opportunity there relative to, it's a PUD or something like that. Not by right, but a planned unit development that
Oh.
then there are, possibilities there, as Missy was saying, for, development to happen, but preservation of certain things also to happen. So there might be middle ground that we can
Mhm.
help reinforce. I don't know, but it would be interesting to see that.
I'd say if there are conditions, I mean, I haven't looked at it yet at all,
Yeah.
as it was just posted, but
Yes.
certainly if like the middle ground is conditions that you would suggest to whoever, planning commission or city
Mhm.
council add to it to beef it up, that
Yeah.
would help.
Okay,
Right, to push an agenda that would then increase preservation or increase maybe, critical root zones, if those can be identified and, kept sacrosanct. Because oftentimes they'll say, yeah, we're going to preserve all these trees, but then that ring of preservation is
Building right up
much,
to that, yeah.
yeah, it's much smaller than it should be. And so they end up dying, a year or two after the project's complete. So I think being clear that, development's going to happen, but we're going to push for certain tree rights. Say like, if you're going to do this and you're doing a waiver and it's going to be a planned unit development, what are the things you're going to put in place that preserve the tree canopy that you've said you're going to preserve?
I did read through it really quickly, Vicky.
Mhm.
They did talk about the urban forester monitoring.
oh,
Some of the, they are proposing to save 70 trees in a small little pocket park.
yeah,
So there is some, Planning Commission is, NDS is, some of those conditions are in there, but we'll take a look at it. And maybe Steve, maybe we can get with you. Have you look at it too, and you and Vicky and I can come up with, make some changes if necessary. Does that make sense?
It is. I have several ideas. So. Yep.
Okay,
good.
Mark, did you
Oh,
raise?
yes, sorry, I didn't hear you calling me. I just reading the letter, I had one comment, and it's an excellent letter that I unfortunately didn't read all the way before the meeting. But a lot of the points that are made talk about the forest or the mature or contiguous forest. And I think in any future reviews and the city's planning decisions, somehow the sort of exponential increase in quality of a of a forested area has to be acknowledged that it's not a collection of trees.
Mhm.
That it is a habitat, that the soil, the properties of that, area are of a whole other magnitude than if you took all the constituent elements and spread them across the city somehow.
Mhm.
So there might be a way to phrase that in such a way that kind of
Yes.
gathers up all the references to forests and so because, management is based on metrics and metrics are based on counting the trees, and it immediately leads us all to think that replacing the number of trees or counting up everything and putting it somewhere else is sufficient, and it's not. And until we have a program that basically quantifies the entire ecosystem services, we're going to be battling this misconception that we can only see the trees and we can't see the forest.
Well said, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as everyone else, having just started glancing, just started processing the staff report. But, I'm looking at sheet 71 of what is in the link, in this meeting packet that Vicky shared this afternoon. It looks like it's a 7.53 acre property, and the proposal is to preserve 0.6 acres.
Yep.
So I'm not convinced that this is a, wonderful compromise,
Yeah.
at least not having, looked at this very carefully yet. And I'm trying to be open-minded, but, to Mark's point, preserving less than 10% of an existing forest, you're ending up with less than 10% of the ecosystem services. It's just kind of a nub of what was there, and it's not functioning the same. But I don't know what the analysis is compared to a by right.
Yeah, I think the complication is that just a small portion of this property is actually critical slopes. And apparently by right, they could go ahead and take down every other tree that's not on the critical slopes. So,
Okay.
and that would leave like 40 trees instead of 70. I think that's what we came up with. Yeah.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, so,
I'm not sure what to do with the letter without knowing more about the project
Okay.
at this point.
Well, if y'all would trust Vicky and me and Steve to look at it, and Steve knows this forest really well, and we'll see what we can do.
is that okay, everybody?
I think everyone agreed, so. Well, we got better news about the climate. action.
Yes. Okay, moving right along.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk with Missy at some point about this also, after I've had a chance to really look at it. Is that okay, Missy? Gone.
Sorry, I'm here. Concerning the azalea.
Azalea Springs, yeah.
Yeah, between myself and Matt's been
Yes.
doing the heavy lifting
Yeah.
and organizing. So he's gonna be your best bet, but I'm available as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so the climate action plan is on the agenda for the planning commission meeting next week. It's an actual hearing on it at 6 o'clock. We sent a letter with our suggestions on the draft climate action plan. And we heard back that they have made most of the changes that we suggested. And I went through the report yesterday and compared it to the suggestions that we sent. And basically, they've got all of them, maybe not as strongly worded as we would like, but it's good. There were a couple of things that got left out. And so I think we need to decide. Okay. One that was left out was in addition to protect land-based carbon sinks and use already degraded land for development. And another was to require adequate setbacks for trees in all development. So do we want to go ahead and just, endorse the plan? Or do we want to endorse it and say, and oh, by the way, we would still like you to add these two things? Yes.
I would move to approve the plan as is. I mean, I think when we met with this group, they stressed that kind of getting it underway and approved is, while they have the momentum, is really important. And the fact that they picked up some of what we've done, I would urge us to vote to approve it.
Without any caveats?
I think there will be, unlike some other things, this is basically a plan for things that are almost entirely in our interest.
Yes.
And so it's
Right.
it's not like this is the plan to overrun Charlottesville with development. This is the plan for the climate. So I think there will be a chance to get, more stuff in, but I would hate to
Yeah.
lose momentum based on, trying to put too fine a point on it. Maybe that's not the right metaphor. But right.
We definitely are going to support it because, and Donna's been very heavily involved in this.
Well, I would say also, I think the one concern that several groups have, indeed, we all are going to definitely support it, but our thought was, what they had been saying was, this plan is out there, we're going to be updating it, and therefore all these things that we didn't get, they'll be in there, and just trust us. And one of the things it's not in there, for instance, is ways to measure accomplishments and, and set some goals and stuff. So that's not, they kept saying, oh, well, that'll happen. But then I had a one-on-one or one-on-5 discussion with, and they were saying, oh, well, we'll do that once a year, but that's not what we want. We don't want to wait a whole year for the new things to appear in that. And so I think one of the issues that's being pushed right now is to say, let's quarterly at least present it to City Council progress report. And that would be the opportunity we'd have to push for those things that we didn't get that we wanted to begin with. So there's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
We-
Annual is tough. You can forget a lot in a year.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the plan doesn't have measurable goals or sort of an action plan, and they keep saying they're going to do it. But that's the heart of the matter. If you don't have measurable goals and keep monitoring what you're doing, a plan sits on the shelf. So,
They have to be very creative about how they're funding this and how they're partnering, and because a lot of the goals just can't be things that no one's ready to write a check for everything in the report. It's,
If they do everything in the report, we'll be living in utopia.
Yeah. Well, maybe we change the letter a little bit, and I think I can't remember if we stressed that at all, but we'd like to see measurable goals.
That was expressed, and her response was, yes, we're looking forward to working with you on the measurable goals. But we could, we could send a letter saying we support the plan, and we suggest quarterly progress reports, and we look forward to working on measurable goals.
Yeah.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So we have a letter there. Could we make a motion that Steve and I thought this was going to be a short meeting. We make a motion to basically approve that we're going to support the plan, and we'll say a few other things like having
Yes.
goals in it.
I motion to approve the plan as discussed, as is with some minor changes.
Second, if that was a motion.
That was a motion, and was that a second?
Yes.
All approved?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I've got one more thing.
Oh, okay, Vicky. Yeah, right. I'm sorry.
In the packet that came out today for the, for next week's meeting of the Planning Commission, NDS put out some more information about their schedule and planning on the zoning. They plan to release the zoning draft in 3 modules. Module 2 will be development standards, which includes landscaping. They expect to issue that draft between March 13th and 17th. And then to have a work session with Planning Commission on March 28th. And they carefully said, you know, don't necessarily hold us to these dates, but that's what we're looking at now.
And as you know, Steve was going to get some representatives from NDS actually to this meeting, so we could just have a conversation
Yeah.
about our goals and their goals when it comes to trees and the natural environment. But that didn't happen, but hopefully we'll do it in January, Steve.
That's right. And they just weren't quite ready until after they'd had their presentation
I see.
prepared. But they're definitely interested.
So we'll do that January or February, so we can have a dialogue.
Yeah.
And get ready for this release.
Yeah. Okay. That's all I have.
All right. Well, I don't think we're going to have any comments from the public. I'm afraid.
Since we don't,
I guess one quick thing, just listening about the climate action plan, things that were left out, the adequate setbacks for trees, that could, you know, become part of the conversation for the March 20th
right,
work session. I mean, it has more teeth there than,
right. And that is part of the recommendations we've already sent on the zoning. True.
one thing I'm, I guess, curious about is we can't really force people to keep the trees they already have on their property, except for, you know, the street trees and things like that. So if maybe this is like thinking too much about it, but if we require a certain amount of setback around trees, we don't want it to backfire and have people just remove the trees so they don't have to deal with it.
Well, often this has to do with new development.
Yeah.
Kareem, you know that new development. I mean, you can look at West Main Street, the state, what's it called? Standard. You know, built right to the sidewalk and no trees, whereas every other building there has, or practically has trees. So
Like the worst.
that's new development. They set the building back enough so there are trees to shade the street as people walking.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm thinking it's that about having room for new trees.
It gets wrapped into like the, yeah, just the regular setbacks to allow, okay.
So let's see, we still have work cut out for us. Let's see, we will, I'll send the, just to sum up, the support letter for the Scanch Branch restoration. Mark and I and Steve will work on the CIP request to be, we want to send that to Planning Commission and City Council soon, this week. The tree nominations will be looking, we'll look at the ones we submitted and give us a report in January. Vicky and Steve and I will look at the Azalea Springs letter, and Vicky and I will look at the climate action plan letter. So I think those are the things we need to do. Most of them this week. Jeff?
The Arbor Committee will look at some options for repurposing of the mall trees.
Yeah, that would be good to have a plan. Yeah, that one too. Okay. Is there anything else? No. Well, thank you. Everybody have a nice holiday. Get some rest.
That's right. We'll see you in January.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know when we'll be able to meet again in person. It's been almost, Brian Maynard, I talked to him today and he reminded me it's been almost 3 years.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start bringing it up more often with Rihanna. But anyway, sorry about the confusion tonight again. Hopefully get that figured out.
Oh, I forgot. I one thing to mention is that it looks like they've stopped putting most heavy equipment here at the corner of 250
Yeah.
and Birdwood. And I don't know if that was you agitating, Steve. I was just getting ready to contact the city councilor, and then I noticed that they stopped doing that. So if that was you, thank you. I feel better for those trees already.
Well, I didn't do much. I complained a couple of times, but I didn't figure it went anywhere. So I doubt it was me. But we'll see.
Oh, go ahead, take the credit.
Yeah,
All
squeaky
right,
wheel.
thank you.
all.
All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Right.
Bye.
Thanks, both.